How can you claim to be, in any sense, a moral person? How do you deal with that?
Well, there's a short way of doing it, and there's a long way. I mean, I'm not sure how much time you've got left, but for example,
Tons.
If you take a fairly well-known story, that I'm going to be amazed, even if with the general sort of ignorance that prevails now, people didn't know about the story of the Good Samaritan, and probably didn't know who told the story, right? It's about a guy from Samaria who, seeing a fellow creature in terrible straits, goes a little bit out of his way, does more than just bind up the wounds and do his best, but he goes later to see that the guy's all right and to pay for it out of his own pocket and takes care, right? Well, this person quite clearly can't be a Christian, or can't have been one, because the story is told before Christianity is a religion. The story is told as a parable. Here's the way you should behave to other people. In other words, religion gets its morality from us. The golden rule, so-called, that probably comes from Confucius, but is best known from a Jewish rabbi in Babylon, Hillel, simply says, what is revolting to you, do not do unto others. Why do you need a supernatural reason to believe that?
Well, Dawkins,
we couldn't have been having this conversation by telephone on opposite sides of the world. We couldn't have evolved this far if people thought any other way. So what is moral, religion can't claim, it's common to us. What is immoral, such as the claim that AIDS is bad, but condoms are worse, that's the specific contribution of the religious. Or Jesus saying, take no thought for the morrow. Who cares about your family? Who cares about your children? Just follow me, because the kingdom of heaven is coming. You can leave everything else to rot. That's not a moral teaching at all. Or Moses saying, we're not saying, but ventriloquizing from Sinai, well, it seems the instruction is to kill everyone who's a member of the Amalekite tribe. We better get on with it. No, that's not a moral teaching. Slavery, genital mutilation, genocide, all mandated. No, let them not try this on me. Let them not bloody try it. I've had enough of that. And of the vile results that one can see in real life of the people who do preach religious evil, wickedness, sadism.
Well, as our friend Dawkins points out in his book, and his emphasis is much more on the evolutionary sequences of events, altruism is as fundamental to the evolutionary process as any form of violence.
Well, I would prefer the noble old word that used to make us both get husky, solidarity. Without human solidarity, we couldn't have evolved. Altruism is asking a bit much. That is saying you simply will do something, a good action, for its own sake, as if to acquire virtue. I've handed back a wallet that I found on the back seat of a cab in my time. I wouldn't trust anyone who wouldn't do that, because what would it be like if no one thought that was a good thing? I mean, we all need to do this, so we'll get our wallets back. I don't want to invest it with altruism. It's solidarity, being able to put yourself in the other person's position, realizing an injury to one is an injury to all. That's elementary. It needs absolutely no supernatural reinforcement. In fact, the attempt to derive it from some mad concept of creation is to degrade it, surely.
I remember again and again hearing that atheism was reductionist, that science was reductionist. I've always taken the view that scientists are the opposite, that theology is lamentably reductionist. It shrinks the whole extraordinary, counterintuitive vastness of the cosmos, of everything you see in a microscope or a telescope.
Oh, well, how right you are. I mean, if you look through the Hubble telescope, you can't say that's reductionist. You're seeing things that are more awe-inspiring than any burning bush could possibly be. And if you want awe and impressive, the beauty of the universe, you've got there. Then you have the beauty of science, the wonderful work of Darwin on species, for example, or a page of Stephen Hawking's lucidity. Any of that is worth a ton of the religious text. You know what I thought you were going to ask me a minute ago? Shall I tell you?
No.
Not to put a question into your mouth. When you said, here's the objection you're bound to meet, I thought you were going to say that the religious will tell you, okay, the Inquisition wasn't so great, the Crusades weren't so wonderful, the years of superstition and slavery and belief that plagues were punishment from God and so on. That wasn't too great, but it's not as bad as secular tyranny.
Well, I was going to ask you that as we wound up, but let's do it now. I also get regular objections when I talk about the 150-60 million that died in the 20th century from wars and genocides.
Yeah, well, it's a good point, and
what do we say? What do we say about the other isms?
It's an essential part of the argument, I think, and I think so to the extent of having included a very long chapter of my book of fascism. The sort of precursor to Nazism, it can be pretty accurately said that it was a Christian-based movement, in fact, particularly a Catholic-based movement. The Concordat between Mussolini and the Vatican is the beginning of fascism, and it was agreed by all the fascist parties to be the basis of their power, from Portugal to Croatia. I mean, this was Catholic anti-communism and anti-Semitism, which was old style, anti-socialism and anti-Semitism, distilled into a much nastier form and made into a totalitarian shape. And in several cases, Croatia is one, and Slovakia is another. Father Tiso, the actual head of the Nazi puppet state, was a man in holy orders. And the Vatican confirms what I say about this, was it's never ceased to try and apologize and explain what the hell it thought it was doing at that point. So that's first. National Socialism and Nazism is not quite the same. Hitler was a Catholic, Goebbels was a Catholic. The churches said prayers for Hitler on his birthday every year he was in power. That is all true. They also had a concordat with Rome, but you have to say, I mean, it was a pagan force that hoped to substitute, but to become itself a religion. You can't say Nazism is secular. That's absurd. The extremely superstitious force that drew on earlier myths of ancient gods and blood myths and so forth, with a big admixture. And every Christian church in Germany has been apologizing for their collusion with it ever since. Moving to communism and socialism, which used to mean so much to both of us. If you take Russia, until 1917, the Tsar was the head of the church, as well as the head of the state. And every peasant in the country believed that the head of the dictator should be somewhat godlike. Well, Stalin would have been a fool, wouldn't he, if he hadn't tried to take advantage of a free gift like that. He's inherited a credulous, servile, faith-based country.
And he was briefly a priest himself, I understand.
And he had been in the seminary himself. He wouldn't have known exactly how to. Come on, this is going to be too easy to replace, because he's inheriting religious barbarism and backwardness. In China, mutatis, roughly the same is true. I should add, by the way, we're not done with the Axis yet, that in Japan, the leader of fascism was not just a priest, but actually a god. The Emperor of Japan, actually a god. So you can't very well say that's secular. But you point out to me, any society in the world that's ever gone wrong or descended into barbarism or cruelty because it adopted the teachings of Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson and Bertrand Russell, who, by the way, Russell was the first to see through communism, because he was a skeptic and an atheist. You just tell me where any society's gone wrong because it adopted the teachings of the Enlightenment and spread them too far. You won't find it. So this is a false issue put around by people who you may notice are saying, well, we may not be great, but at least we're not Hitler. Well, if I was a believer in God, I'd want to say a bit better for myself than that.
How's the book being received in the United States so far?
Number 3 on Amazon today, with no effort at all, following the huge success of Dawkins, Dennett, Sam Harris, and others. I have a very small new publisher. I've been on a few TV shows. I've said I'll take any challenge from any religious person. I've had some of those. People who are ready to join a counterattack against clerical bullying and stupidity and intimidation and worse. No, I mean, it's going great guns, for Christ's sake. We haven't got our trousers off yet.
I need help in Australia, Christopher. I keep asking you to come here to Writers' Weeks, festivals of ideas. What's wrong with Australia?
I know, I feel terrible. I really do feel terrible about it, but I've had to stay so close to home lately, what with fighting off the parties of God in their attempt to destroy Iraq, what with combating leftist delusions in jihad, people who talk about the Taliban as if they represented liberation theology, this and that and the other thing. You know the sort of riffraff I'm talking about. That I've had all my work cut out for me. But I would love to come back to Australia. We could go back to that place on Bondi where